Imagine a man so powerful he could single-handedly bail out the entire United States government, not once, but twice. A figure whose very name commanded respect and fear. A man whose decisions reverberated through the halls of industry and the corridors of power. This was J.P. Morgan, a titan of finance, a name synonymous with wealth, influence, and an almost mythical ability to shape the destiny of a nation. For decades, the story of J.P. Morgan has been intertwined with the very fabric of American capitalism. He is often hailed as the man who saved the U.S. economy, an indispensable figure who stepped in when the government faltered, preventing catastrophic financial collapses that would have plunged millions into destitution. Yet, this narrative of a national savior is just one side of a very complex coin. For many, Morgan was not merely a rescuer, he was a master manipulator, a man who, in effect, owned the government, wielding unprecedented control over political affairs and the nation's economic arteries. How did one man amass such staggering power in an era before central banks and robust government regulation? Was he truly a benevolent savior, driven by a patriotic duty to prevent chaos, or a ruthless monopolist, expertly exploiting systemic weaknesses to consolidate his own vast empire? These are the questions that lie at the heart of J.P. Morgan's legacy, a legacy that continues to spark debate and fascination. In the coming moments, we will dive deep into the dramatic events that defined his life, uncovering shocking insights into the true extent of his influence and the controversies that shadowed his every move. Prepare to explore a time when the lines between private enterprise and national governance were blurred, and one individual could hold the fate of an entire nation in his hands. To truly understand J.P. Morgan, we must first cast our minds back to the volatile and largely unregulated economic landscape of late 19th century America. The post-Civil War era was a period of explosive growth, but also profound instability. The nation, still reeling from the war, was a patchwork of burgeoning industries, fiercely competing railroads, and a banking system prone to periodic panics. There was no Federal Reserve, no FDIC, no safety nets to catch the economy when it stumbled. It was a wild, untamed frontier for capital, ripe for both immense opportunity and catastrophic failure. The Industrial Revolution was roaring, transforming America from an agrarian society into an industrial powerhouse. Factories sprang up, railroads crisscrossed the continent, and new technologies emerged at a dizzying pace. This rapid industrialization, however, demanded colossal amounts of capital, far more than traditional local banks could provide. This created a vacuum, a desperate need for sophisticated financial mechanisms to fund these ambitious ventures. It was in this environment that the nascent field of investment banking began to truly take shape, playing a crucial, though often controversial, role in channeling capital and fueling expansion. It was into this world that John Pierpont Morgan was born, inheriting not just a name, but also a formidable lineage. His family, already well established in banking, provided him with a privileged upbringing and, crucially, direct access to the sophisticated financial networks of Europe. This early exposure to international finance would prove invaluable, giving him an edge in an American market still finding its footing. His early career was marked by strategic moves, forging partnerships, and demonstrating an innate understanding of how to consolidate power and capital. He quickly established a reputation for shrewdness, decisiveness, and an unwavering belief in order. Morgan's philosophy, often termed Morganization, was simple yet revolutionary: consolidate industries. He believed that fierce, unregulated competition led to instability, price wars, and ultimately economic collapse. By bringing competing companies under a single, powerful umbrella, he argued, stability could be achieved, efficiency improved, and profits maximized. This wasn't merely about personal gain. Morgan genuinely believed he was bringing order to chaos, creating robust, stable enterprises that would benefit the nation in the long run. He became the architect of trusts, assembling vast industrial empires that controlled everything from railroads to steel, forever changing the face of American business. But this consolidation also concentrated immense power in his hands, setting the stage for his dramatic interventions in national crises and the enduring question of whether he was a savior or a kingmaker. His early career was marked by strategic moves, forging partnerships, and demonstrating an innate understanding of how to consolidate power and capital. He quickly established a reputation for shrewdness, decisiveness, and an unwavering belief in order. Morgan's philosophy, often termed Morganization, was simple yet revolutionary: consolidate industries. He believed that fierce, unregulated competition led to instability, price wars, and ultimately economic collapse. By bringing competing companies under a single powerful umbrella, he argued, stability could be achieved, efficiency improved, and profits maximized. This wasn't merely about personal gain. Morgan genuinely believed he was bringing order to chaos, creating robust, stable enterprises that would benefit the nation in the long run. He became the architect of trusts, assembling vast industrial empires that controlled everything from railroads to steel, forever changing the face of American business. But this consolidation also concentrated immense power in his hands, setting the stage for his dramatic interventions in national crises and the enduring question of whether he was a savior or a kingmaker. The impact of the Industrial Revolution on America's economic fabric cannot be overstated. From the ashes of the Civil War, a new nation was rising, fueled by steam, steel, and ambition. The demand for capital was insatiable. Railroads needed massive investments to lay tracks across vast distances, connecting disparate markets and opening up new frontiers. Factories required immense sums to build and equip, to churn out goods that were transforming daily life. This wasn't simply about innovation. It was about scale, about building an industrial infrastructure that dwarfed anything the world had seen before. Traditional banking, rooted in local deposits and short-term loans, was utterly unprepared for this new reality. This is where investment banking, in its nascent form, stepped in. These financial pioneers weren't just lending money, they were structuring deals, underwriting stock and bond issues, and finding investors willing to back ambitious, often risky ventures. They acted as intermediaries between the vast pools of capital, particularly from Europe, and the burgeoning industries of America. It was a high-stakes game, and only those with deep pockets, extensive networks, and an almost clairvoyant understanding of markets could thrive. J.P. Morgan, with his family's established presence and his own formidable intellect, was perfectly positioned to dominate this emerging field. His early ventures included financing railroads, a sector notorious for its boom and bust cycles. Morgan saw not just the chaos, but the potential for order and immense profit. He didn't just invest. He restructured, he reorganized, he imposed discipline. He would famously buy up bankrupt railways, merge them, and then install his own management teams, turning them into efficient, profitable enterprises. This wasn't just about making money. It was about building a reputation as a fixer, as someone who could bring stability to even the most volatile industries. His early success in these endeavors cemented his standing as a force to be reckoned with, a man whose word carried immense weight in the financial world. The concept of Morganization went beyond mere mergers. It was a philosophy of control. Morgan believed that competition, if left unchecked, was inherently destructive. His solution was to eliminate it, or at least severely curtail it, by consolidating industries into massive trusts. This approach allowed for economies of scale, reduced wasteful duplication, and crucially, stabilized prices and profits. While celebrated by some for bringing order and efficiency, it also sparked fierce criticism from those who saw it as the creation of monopolies that stifled innovation and exploited consumers. Yet, for Morgan, it was a necessary step towards building a robust, stable American economy, one that could withstand the inevitable shocks and panics that plagued the era. This profound belief in consolidation, in imposing order through sheer financial might, would define his career and set the stage for his most dramatic interventions in the life of the nation. He was shaping the very structure of American capitalism, one massive merger at a time, preparing himself for the moments when the nation would desperately need a savior, or, as some would argue, a master. This profound belief in consolidation, in imposing order through sheer financial might, would define his career and set the stage for his most dramatic interventions in the life of the nation. He was shaping the very structure of American capitalism, one massive merger at a time, preparing himself for the moments when the nation would desperately need a savior, or, as some would argue, a master. The year 1893 brought one such moment, a financial maelstrom that would test the very foundations of the American economy. The panic of 1893 wasn't an isolated tremor. It was a devastating earthquake, triggered by a confluence of factors that exposed the fragility of a rapidly expanding but largely unregulated system. Over-speculation in railroads, an industry Morgan knew intimately, had led to massive bankruptcies, creating a domino effect across the financial landscape. Compounding this was the contentious debate over the silver standard. The Sherman Silver Purchase Act of 1890, which required the U.S. Treasury to buy millions of ounces of silver, was seen by many as undermining the gold standard, leading to a loss of confidence in the nation's currency. Foreign investors, wary of potential devaluation, began pulling their gold out of the U.S. at an alarming rate. The government, however, found itself ill-equipped to handle such a crisis. In an era before the Federal Reserve, there was no central bank to act as a lender of last resort, no institution capable of injecting liquidity into the system or stabilizing the currency. The U.S. Treasury, the nation's financial bedrock, watched helplessly as its gold reserves dwindled to dangerously low levels. The specter of national insolvency loomed large, threatening to plunge the country into an even deeper depression. Businesses failed, unemployment soared, and social unrest simmered. The government, under President Grover Cleveland, was paralyzed, lacking both the legal framework and the financial muscle to effectively intervene. It was into this void that J.P. Morgan stepped, not as a government official, but as a private citizen wielding unprecedented financial power. As the gold drain accelerated and the Treasury's reserves dipped perilously close to the psychological and practical threshold of $100 million, Morgan recognized the dire urgency. He knew that if the U.S. defaulted on its debts, the global financial system would face catastrophic consequences, and his own vast empire would not be immune. His bold proposal was audacious. He offered to supply the U.S. government with $62 million in gold, bypassing traditional channels and essentially acting as a private central bank. To execute this colossal undertaking, Morgan didn't act alone. He swiftly assembled a powerful syndicate of bankers, primarily composed of his own firm, J.P. Morgan & Co., and the Rothschilds of Europe. This consortium would underwrite a bond issue, selling government bonds for gold, thereby replenishing the Treasury's coffers and restoring confidence. The deal was controversial, to say the least. Critics were outraged that a private citizen, albeit a supremely wealthy one, could dictate terms to the sovereign government of the United States. They questioned the legality, the ethics, and the sheer audacity of such an arrangement. Public perception was sharply divided. On one hand, there was a palpable sense of relief that the crisis had been averted, that the nation's credit had been saved from utter collapse. Morgan was hailed by some as a national hero, a financial titan who had stepped in when the government could not. On the other hand, a deep-seated resentment simmered. The image of a powerful, unelected financier holding the nation's purse strings, extracting a profit in its moment of weakness, fueled populist anger. It cemented the perception that powerful industrialists and bankers held undue sway over the democratic process, that wealth translated directly into power, effectively owning the government. This intervention, while undeniably critical in stabilizing the American economy, also laid bare the profound vulnerabilities of a system without a central monetary authority and highlighted the immense, almost monarchical, influence that J.P. Morgan had accumulated. It was a stark demonstration of his power, both to save and to provoke intense public scrutiny and distrust. The 1893 bailout, while a resounding success in averting financial catastrophe, merely foreshadowed an even greater wave of economic transformation, the consolidation mania. The turn of the 20th century was an era defined by a relentless drive towards industrial giants, a period where fragmented industries were systematically absorbed and synthesized into behemoth corporations. J.P. Morgan, ever the architect of order and stability, saw this not just as an opportunity for profit, but as a necessary evolution to bring efficiency and control to chaotic markets. He believed that competition, if left unchecked, led to ruinous price wars and instability. Consolidation, on the other hand, brought economies of scale, rationalized production, and predictable returns. His magnum opus in this arena was undoubtedly the creation of U.S. Steel Corporation in 1901. This was no ordinary merger. It was the birth of the world's first billion-dollar corporation, a company so vast it dwarfed entire national economies of the time. To achieve this, Morgan orchestrated the acquisition of numerous independent steel companies, the crown jewel among them being Andrew Carnegie's famed Carnegie Steel Company. The story of the deal of the century is legendary. Morgan, tired of Carnegie's relentless price wars and his threat to build a competing railroad, approached the steel magnate. A quick negotiation, a handshake, and a check for $480 million sealed the transaction. Morgan then combined Carnegie's assets with Federal Steel Company, National Tube Company, and others, creating an integrated steel-making empire that controlled everything from iron ore mines to finished products. U.S. Steel was a testament to Morgan's vision, a symbol of American industrial might, and a practical demonstration of his belief in the power of consolidation. But Morgan's ambitions weren't confined to steel. His relentless pursuit of order extended to the nation's burgeoning transportation network. The railroads, vital arteries of commerce, were plagued by cutthroat competition and frequent bankruptcies. Morgan envisioned a more rational system, one where wasteful duplication was eliminated and profits were maximized through cooperation rather than conflict. This led to the formation of the Northern Securities Company in 1901, a massive railroad holding company designed to control the major rail lines in the American Northwest, effectively monopolizing transportation in a vast region. It was an audacious move, a direct challenge to the very concept of free competition. However, Morgan's seemingly unstoppable march towards consolidation soon met a formidable obstacle: President Theodore Roosevelt. The young, energetic president, a champion of the common man and an ardent believer in fair play, viewed these massive trusts not as engines of progress, but as threats to democracy and economic opportunity. He famously declared himself a trust buster, and Northern Securities became his first major target. In 1902, the U.S. government filed suit against Northern Securities under the Sherman Antitrust Act, arguing that it was an illegal combination in restraint of trade. Morgan, incredulous that his efforts to bring stability could be deemed unlawful, famously exclaimed, "If we have done anything wrong, send your man to my man, and they can fix it up." Roosevelt, however, was unyielding. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court. In 1904, in a landmark 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court ruled against Northern Securities, ordering its dissolution. This ruling was a watershed moment. It signaled a new era of government intervention in the economy, establishing the principle that even the most powerful corporations were subject to federal oversight. For Morgan, it was a rare public defeat, a clear message that his power, while immense, was not absolute. The Northern Securities decision demonstrated that while he could consolidate industries and rescue the government, he could not entirely dictate the rules of the game. It set a precedent that would impact corporate power for decades to come, proving that even a titan like J.P. Morgan could be challenged by the collective will of the nation as embodied by its government. Despite the setback with Northern Securities, the fundamental instability of the American financial system remained unaddressed. The nation still lacked a central bank, a lender of last resort, a mechanism to inject liquidity during times of crisis. This glaring omission would once again plunge the country into chaos, leading to what many consider J.P. Morgan's finest and most controversial hour, the Panic of 1907. The early 20th century was a period of robust economic growth, but also rampant speculation. Unregulated trust companies, functioning much like banks but without the same oversight, sprang up, offering high returns and engaging in risky investments. The stock market surged, fueled by optimism and a speculative fervor that often outpaced rational judgment. Beneath this veneer of prosperity, however, lay a fragile foundation. A series of events began to unravel this precarious balance. In March 1907, a sharp stock market correction known as the rich man's panic offered a foretaste of what was to come. Then, in October, two speculators attempted to corner the stock of United Copper Company. Their scheme failed spectacularly, sending the company's share price plummeting and triggering widespread fear. The contagion quickly spread. One of the largest and most prominent trust companies, the Knickerbocker Trust Company, was heavily invested in the failed copper venture and other speculative endeavors. As rumors of its insolvency circulated, depositors began a frantic run on the bank, desperate to withdraw their money. The Knickerbocker, unable to meet the sudden demand, was forced to close its doors on October 22nd. Its failure sent shockwaves through Wall Street and the entire financial system. Other trust companies, already weakened by speculative losses, faced similar runs. Banks, fearing for their own solvency, hoarded cash and refused to lend to one another, effectively freezing the credit markets. Businesses, unable to secure loans, faced collapse, threatening widespread unemployment. The United States government, still without a central bank, found itself powerless once again, possessing neither the legal authority nor the financial resources to effectively intervene and stem the tide of panic. It was into this void that J.P. Morgan stepped, a figure of immense authority and unwavering resolve. He was by then 70 years old, but his legendary influence remained undiminished. Recognizing the catastrophic potential of the crisis, Morgan immediately took charge. He convened a meeting of the nation's leading bankers and financiers at his magnificent library on Madison Avenue. The atmosphere was tense, filled with fear and distrust. Morgan, however, was resolute. He locked the doors, reportedly telling the assembled titans that no one would leave until a solution was found. He demanded cooperation, forcing rival bankers to commit their resources to prop up failing institutions. Acting with a speed and decisiveness that the government could only dream of, Morgan effectively transformed his private library into the nation's financial command center. He personally orchestrated a series of bailouts, pooling resources from sound banks to inject liquidity into those on the brink of collapse. He organized a syndicate to purchase New York City bonds, preventing the city from defaulting. When the New York Stock Exchange faced closure due to a lack of funds for daily transactions, Morgan personally intervened, securing a massive loan from other bankers and directing its distribution to keep the exchange operational. He browbeat, cajoled, and negotiated, often working through the night, his will alone seemingly holding the financial world together. He was, in essence, acting as a one-man central bank, a private institution performing a crucial public service that the government was incapable of providing. The panic of 1907 served as a stark, undeniable lesson. The repeated crises and Morgan's repeated, albeit controversial, interventions made it abundantly clear that the United States could no longer rely on the benevolence of a single financier to safeguard its economy. The lack of a centralized, government-backed institution was a dangerous vulnerability. This realization ultimately paved the way for a revolutionary change. The events of 1907 galvanized public opinion and political will, creating an urgent mandate for financial reform. It directly led to the establishment of the Federal Reserve System in 1913, a permanent governmental solution designed to provide stability, manage the money supply, and prevent future panics. Morgan's ultimate rescue act, therefore, not only saved the country from immediate collapse, but also laid the groundwork for the modern American financial system, forever changing the role of government in economic affairs. J.P. Morgan's legacy, therefore, remains a complex tapestry, woven with threads of national salvation and the stark reality of immense concentrated private power. He was undeniably the architect of modern American finance, a titan who imposed order on a chaotic, unregulated economy. Yet, his actions, however necessary in times of crisis, raised profound questions about who truly held the reins of power in a democracy. Was he a selfless patriot, stepping in where the government failed, or a ruthless monopolist, exploiting systemic weaknesses for personal gain and control? The answer, perhaps, lies somewhere in the intricate grey area between these two extremes. This duality was not lost on his contemporaries. The very interventions that saved the nation also solidified fears of a money trust, the belief that a small cabal of financiers, led by Morgan, controlled the country's economic destiny. These concerns culminated in the Pujo Committee investigation of 1912, a congressional inquiry specifically tasked with examining the concentration of financial power. Morgan himself was called to testify, a rare and dramatic public appearance for the notoriously private banker. During his testimony, he famously declared that the control of money was not a bad thing, as long as it was in the hands of honest men. This statement, while perhaps reflecting his own conviction, only fueled public outrage and confirmed the fears of many that an unelected elite wielded undue influence. The Pujo Committee's findings heavily influenced the subsequent creation of the Federal Reserve, a direct governmental response to curb the kind of private power Morgan embodied. Beyond his financial exploits, Morgan also left an indelible mark. Through his extensive philanthropy and his legendary art collection, his passion for art was profound. He amassed one of the world's most significant private collections, much of which he later bequeathed to institutions like the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, effectively shaping American cultural landscape for generations. He was a generous benefactor to hospitals, museums, and educational institutions, demonstrating a multifaceted ambition that extended beyond mere profit. These contributions, however, did little to soften the image of the omnipotent financier in the eyes of his critics. Morgan's impact on modern finance is undeniable and enduring. His pioneering work in consolidating industries, underwriting massive corporate ventures, and stabilizing markets laid the very foundation for the integrated, powerful American financial system we know today. He demonstrated the critical importance of capital formation and the role of investment banking in driving economic growth. Even as governmental regulation increased, the principles of market stability and the need for robust financial institutions that Morgan championed, often through sheer force of will, continue to resonate. As we look back at J.P. Morgan's extraordinary life, we are compelled to reflect on the delicate balance between power and responsibility. His story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. At what point does private enterprise become too powerful? What are the ethical implications when the fate of a nation rests in the hands of a few individuals, however capable? And how do we ensure that the mechanisms designed to prevent economic collapse do not, in themselves, create new forms of unchecked authority? Morgan's era was a crucible, forging the financial backbone of a burgeoning superpower. His actions, both celebrated and condemned, profoundly shaped the trajectory of American capitalism. His story is a powerful reminder that the interplay between government, big business, and the public good is a constantly evolving dynamic, one that demands our continuous attention and critical examination. The lessons of J.P. Morgan's life, the triumphs, the controversies, and the ultimate reshaping of an entire economic system remain profoundly relevant as we navigate the complexities of today's global financial world. We are encouraged to delve deeper, to debate the ongoing role of private enterprise versus governmental intervention in ensuring economic stability, and to consider what safeguards are truly necessary to protect both prosperity and democratic principles in an ever-interconnected world.